Good morning, all. Good to see your smiling faces here on our Hollywood Square Zoom. And well, I'm continually amazed on how spirit works in our services. The, the word for today, guidance. I did not know what the daily word was today until I sat at the breakfast table and read this. And Lon's song about gospel in one word being love. What these themes just meld right together with what's on my talk gear. So it's just amazing to me how spirit works in our lives. And I entitled this talk "Freestyling." I kind of did that as a placeholder for putting my message together, and it could easily be called "Now What? Now What?" Margie and I pretty much marched through Myrtle Fillmore's book, How to Let God Help You, and using those chapters as a basis for our theme of our lessons. And, the book's ended, and I'm thinking, okay, now what? Okay, well, I can pick a topic here. And I was reflecting a little bit on when I was on active duty in the Coast Guard for 28 years. I get up in the morning and say, someday I'm going to be retired. And in June of 96, I retired, and I went, now what? I had a 5-acre ranch in Modesto, and I thought, wow, I can get all these projects that I have ever wanted to get done. Well, after about 6 months, I said, I think I need to get a job. I need a rest to get away from this place. So now what? And I think the words "now what" comes from my reflection on that movie, Finding Nemo. The last scene where the fish are floating in the Sydney harbor. Nemo had escaped out the drain in the dentist's office, and the rest of them were trapped in this aquarium tank, and they were plotting how to get out. And they blocked the filter, and the dentist put them in these little plastic bags, and they worked their way over by the window, down onto the street, across the busy street, into the harbor of Sydney Harbor, and they're all floating in these individual plastic bags. And the blowfish in the back looks out and he goes, now what? Now what? So I think we come to these things in our life where we ask ourselves, now what? It could be in our personal life, our professional life. Also in our world. Yesterday was the 20th anniversary of the Twin Towers attack and Pentagon attack. So, wow, 20 years ago. And it's a little different because that was the precipitating event that we invaded Afghanistan and Iraq to quench this reign of terror, and now we're pulling out of there. So if we're reading our morning paper, we're probably thinking to ourselves, well, now what? Now what do we do? And on top of that, here in Northern California, we have our fires, our wildfires. Now what? And also the pandemic, the Delta variant. Now what? Is there going to be another variant coming along? So with all this stuff milling about in our brains, what can we do as Unity 2 students? Well, the thing that came to mind was prayer. And I think Lee talked about that last Sunday. I don't know exactly what you said, Lee, but not probably in parallel what we're talking about here. We can do prayer, and of course, it's corollary, meditation. Now, I've been told prayer is talking to God, and meditation is listening to God. Charles Fillmore, our co-founder of the Unity Movement, used to sit in the silence every night and listen for that small, still voice, for getting direction, getting guidance. So where does guidance come from? From God, of course. So, and I think we need to be open to ourselves and where we're going to go with this guidance to receive. Found a quote from Bruce Lee. Now, Bruce Lee was instrumental in bringing Chinese martial arts over to America. And Bruce had written this. He said, seriously, if you want to put limits on what you can do, physical or anything else, it'll spread over into the rest of your life. It will spread into your work, into your morality, into your entire being. There are no limits. There are plateaus, but you must not stay there. You must go beyond them. A person must constantly exceed their level. So Bruce Lee, he was exceeding. He practiced his martial arts so much, In fact, when he was playing Robin in that movie, Batman and Robin, he actually had to slow his movements down because he was just a blur on the camera. He was so quick. So for him, there was no limits as he practiced his martial arts and spread it through the rest of the country here. It's important as we listen for this guidance in our spiritual thing. Oliver Wendell Holmes was on a train one day, and he's searching through his jacket for his ticket, and the conductor's standing there, and he cannot find his ticket. And the conductor says, Justice Holmes, if we can't trust a Supreme Court justice, you can send us this stuff. Who do we trust? And he was still flustered, and he says, no, Mr. Holmes, please take it. And Oliver Wendell Holmes was reported to say to his conductor, he was saying in complete frustration, my dear man, that is not my problem. I need my ticket to know where I'm going. So it's not so much to show other things, but who knows, he was on this trip and he needed to know where he was headed for, what town it was. So, wow. So we've got prayer and meditation as one tool that we can do as two students. And another one is lead by example, leading by example. The Course in Miracles has a line that says, teach only love, for that is what you are. Teach only love, for that is what you are. And boy, I find it interesting that Lon's song, the gospel in one word is love, love. So how can we do this? Well, we can tie these together. We can do prayer, or we can lead. I've often been told, if you're going to pray for potatoes, grab a hoe. You need to put feet to your prayers. And if we're looking at the gospel or the book of James, faith without works is dead. So we need to put action to our prayers and our meditation things. And one of the good examples of that, putting prayer to work, we can approach everyone with an attitude of peace and goodwill. Approach everyone with an attitude of peace and goodwill. And a Bible story that seems to speak to that is the story of the Good Samaritan. The Samaritans and the Jews were at odds with one another. The Jews coming down from Galilee used to go all the way over to the Jordan Valley, go down, and then go across down into Jerusalem to avoid going through Samaria. They detested one another. Yet the story of the Good Samaritan, the Samaritan is going along the road to Jericho, and he sees this obviously Jewish person who's beat up. As a matter of fact, he looks like he's dead. And he decides to take care of his wounds. And interestingly, two other people passed by, a Levi and a priest. Now, according to their religious tradition, if they touched a dead body, they were ritually unclean and they couldn't do their job. So they chose to pass by. They chose form over substance. They put their duty first. And here this Samaritan, who is despised by the Jews, binds this man up. And the story doesn't say that they became best friends. The Samaritan just took him along the way, brought him to an inn, offered to pay for anything more on his way back. So, reaching out to others in an attitude of goodwill. As I read through these Charles Fillmore's talks every Tuesday, it seems there was a repetitive Bible story that kept coming up. And even though these talks are years apart, this Fillmore talk that I happened to choose for that had the story of Peter and John healing the lame beggar at the temple. And it's interesting to look at this story in a nutshell and then look at it, the moral of it, and also like in a unity metaphysical, what does it mean beyond the physical story? So in a nutshell, Peter and John are going into Jerusalem, and there's a beggar who is lame from birth. His friends drag him to the gate, and it's called the Gate Beautiful, and he's there to beg for alms as people come through to go into the temple. So Peter and John are going through, and he looks up and says to them, he's begging for alms, and Peter says, look at me. Silver and gold have I none, but what I do have, in the name of Jesus Christ, stand up and walk. And he grabs him by the right hand and lifts him up, And the man's ankles were instantly healed, and he was leaping and joying and goes into the temple and praising in the temple. Now, the people that saw this guy, they know who he is because he's been there for years, and now he's healed. So let's take a look at that story. Well, what is the moral of that story? It's, get rid of the material and go for the spiritual. This guy's looking for money, and Peter gives him the spiritual fix. And if we look at that story metaphysically, where each part of that person, place, and things represents part of our consciousness, from the 12 powers concept, we know that Peter represents faith, and faith is up in the pineal gland of our brain. And John represents love. So when this love and faith get connected, and they're going to the temple, they bump into this beggar. Now that guy can represent those thoughts that we are not really sure of. Our feet are that connection to the material world. And here this guy's ankles were broken or disformed, and he could not make that connection to the material world. So we may have those thoughts as we go on our spiritual path. We're connected with faith and with love, but still we are not connected. So we need to connect with that Christ within and reach out with our right hand, our executive hand, and power up. And we get to go forward in our spiritual walk. So there was a quote I came across from Alexander Graham Bell. He says, when one door closes, another opens. But we often look so long and so regretfully look upon the closed door that we do not see the one that is open before us. So as I was thinking about this beggar, for years he's been there. He's looking just up for getting hands. And it took that connection with the apostles, Peter and John, to open this new door. And luckily he stepped through it. He went into the temple and was praising and leaping and doing that. So, wow. One other quote that I came across was Ernest Holmes, the founder of the religious science movement. He says, life will be to you what you are to it. Life will be what you are to it. In unity, we look at our thinking, as we think in our thoughts, that's what manifests in our world. And also what's happening in the collective consciousness, the race consciousness, as Fillmore calls it, that impacts what's happening in our world. So what do we do as we move forward in our life? A young man visited a monastery one time, and he asked the monks, what do you do? And the guy says, well, we pray, but, we fall and we get up, and we fall and we get up, and we fall and we get up. So monks, even though they're in their monastery, they can tend to make errors. There's a Zen koan that goes like this. It says, a truly enlightened person falls into a well. How is that so? A truly enlightened person falls into a well. How is that so? So we think that somebody is spiritually enlightened, they're moving forward, and my goodness, they trip and fall. So even in the spiritually enlightened path that we're on, we can fall, we can make mistakes. And the big thing that this monk emphasized, they got up. So, and it's important to remember that, guess what? Spirit is on our side. Spirit is on our side. Einstein, as I was asked about, is the universe a friendly place or a not friendly place? And he says, it's a friendly place, of course. So a lot has to do with our attitude and outlook on life. And as we go through our day, like looking at our morning paper, we could open ourselves up to worry. And I can open myself up to worry at the least little thing. I don't know about you, but I sent away from my driver's license a couple of weeks ago to renew it. And I'm over that age where you would have to go in, but now they made it by mail. And I sent the check off and I went, oh God, maybe they're going to change the rule and I have to go in. Maybe they're going to renew my license for a small period of time. So it's amazing how my brain can latch onto the least little thing and give me something to anguish about. And I think that's fairly common with us. But the thing to remember is worry is about something that has not happened yet. Something that has not happened. So by definition, guess what that is? It's a fantasy. And the way around our worry is the same thing that got us there in the first place, this power of imagination. We get to use that power of imagination and imagine the good things. You know, in that movie, The Secret, it was talking about imagine checks showing up in your mailbox, or imagine people calling you for job opportunities. So if we start to get into that worry wart thing, kind of turn it around and say, all right, I'm going to imagine the best thing that can happen rather than the worst. And we get to do and use where we are with what we got and the place we are with the things we've got. That's a song that we used to sing in ministerial school or a lot. And I came across the story of the Brooklyn Bridge. Now my niece is visiting us. Margie's mom died about 2 weeks ago. And my niece, Monica, flew back from New York. And I was reflecting on when we had visited her a couple of years ago. We walked across the Brooklyn Bridge. And I was marveling at this huge bridge, and we watched a documentary on it. And then I just came across this other story about the Brooklyn Bridge and how it was built. It was built in 1883. And a fellow named John Roebling had the idea of building this steel suspension bridge to connect Manhattan and Brooklyn. And he tried to get the other engineers in New York City to kind of buy into his ideas. And they were saying, no, there's no way that's going to happen. Then he tried to get financing for it. Financing bankers are saying, I don't think so, John. Well, he persisted and he got the engineers to come on board and on his team, and he got the financing for it. And he brought his son, Washington Roebling, who was also an engineer, to help him in this. Well, it was a few months into the project and an accident happened and John Roebling was killed. And not long after that, Washington Roebling suffered from caisson's disease. They were building these tunnels using air pressure like they're underwater, and he had this caisson's disease, and it left him bedridden. He couldn't walk, he couldn't talk. The only thing he could do was move his little finger. Talk about a now what? Well, his wife, Emily Warren Roebling, stepped into a role of leadership. Now, she had immersed herself in her father-in-law's and her husband's building of this bridge, so she had some idea what they were talking about. And she devised a code. She took John's hand, or Washington's hand, laid it on her arm, and with his finger, they devised a code. And because the mind was still sharp, and he knew all about this, building this bridge, but he couldn't speak it. He couldn't walk. So she became the liaison between the people building the bridge and Washington Roebling. And 3 years of tapping out this code, 13 years of tapping out this code, the bridge was finally finished. So being persistent and doing what you can with what you've got and the place you are with the thing you got really shows up in that. And there's a poem that I found that kind of speaks to this idea of where are we going to go with this now what? Are we going to build it up or are we going to try and tear it down? And it's called The Wrecking Crew. I stood on the streets of a busy town watching men tearing a building down. With a heave-ho and a loud yell, they swung a beam and an entire section fell. I asked the foreman, are those men as skilled as those you had hired if you wanted to build? No way, he said. No, indeed. Just common labor is all I need. I can tear down as much in a day or two as it would take skilled men a year to do. And then I thought as I went on my way, which of these two roles do I choose to play? Do I walk life's road with love and care, striving to build, encourage, and share? Or am I one who roams the town, content at merely tearing down? Instead of being a wave maker, I became a waymaker. And to become a waymaker, we have to change the foundation of our lives. And one way to change our foundation is to, first of all, set an intention. When we're ready for change, set an intention. Engage a trusted partner or whatever and speak the intention where you're going to go. And it helps if we can even write that intention down, keep it on our prayer list, keep it someplace where we're doing our meditation, use it as a mantra. And as we move through, we can keep that daily in our sights. And If things don't happen quickly, don't discourage. Sometimes it takes time for the things to get unblocked, just to move in there so we can move in our direction where we want to change. And I found 4 foundation legs to change as we move forward in our life. The first of them is love. Gospel in one word, like Lon was saying. Love is the bridge builder, like the road lanes. That may have taken a while, but we connect that bridge. Fillmore calls it the attracting force of our universe. Through love, we attract things into our life. Second leg is trust. We must learn to trust ourselves, trust other people, trust the process. Oh my God, trust the process. Third, respect for other people, respect for ourselves, and a desire to build up rather than tear down. So respecting others. And lastly, be a promoter. Like Emily Rowling stepped forward and became a promoter for her husband and for herself to get this wonderful bridge built in New York. So, like a chair, we have 4 legs, and we got these 4 foundations in our life. We are not going to fall off our chair because it's not going to fall over. So, let's take a quick look at what we've done this morning. We talked about now what's in our lives, personal, professional, whatever. We looked at the 9/11 situation and also what else is going on in our world. We talked about 2 things we can do, prayer and leading by example. And remember the story of the Good Samaritan. The guy didn't become Jesus' best friend, or the Samaritan didn't become the Jew's best friend. He just helped them. He saw a person in need. So we can do that. And that story about Peter and John helping the blind or the lame beggar, through faith and love, we connect and we can bring good things to work. Life will be what it means to be. And if we start to worry about stuff, remember that the thing that we're using to worry about, we can use that same power to imagine the good. Talked about building the bridge and a poem about the wrecking crew. And are we going to be building up or are we going to be tearing down? And about declaring our intention with the 4 foundations of love, trust, respect, and promoting. Step into that leadership role. So, dear ones, let's move into our period of meditative reflection. I invite you to sit comfortably on your chair. Close your eyes if you so desire, or just let your gaze be softly forward at this wonderful Hollywood Squares display of beautiful spiritual faces, knowing that we're connected heart to heart as well as technology connected through the Zoom media. Bring our attention to our breath, and as we breathe in, imagine we are inspiring spirit. And that spirit that we're inspiring connects with that spirit of the divine that is within each and every one of us. And as we bring our attention down to our heart center, our heart, that wonderful symbol of love in our culture. And if there's any part of our body temple that needs that healing hand of love, we imagine love-filled blood flowing from our heart center out to this part of our body temple, bathing it in a blue-white bubble of healing, loving energy, bringing about the right and perfect solution at the right and perfect time. And if there's any person, place, thing, or event, any special now what situation that may be facing us, we see that bathed in a blue-white light bubble of spiritual healing energy, bringing about the right and perfect solution, the right and perfect time, and in the right and perfect way. And Jesus of Nazareth, when asked by his disciples, saying, Lord, teach us how to pray, he said to go within to the closet of your being. Shut the door to the outside world, and the Father, which hears in secret, speaks in a small, still voice. And we heard that same wording in our daily word today about speaking in a small, still voice. So we've gone into the closet of our being, our heart center. We mentally shut the door to the outside world. And we listen for that small, still voice, or perhaps images flashing across the screen of our mind, or thoughts going across our mind as we gently rest in the silence. And I'll ring our bell 3 times, and we'll start a period of about 3 to 4 minutes of silence as we listen and watch. And now we bring our attention to our physical bodies. We become aware of the presence of our feet on the floor, our body against our chair. And perhaps in our time of silence, we heard a small, still voice or something similar to it, or images or thoughts floating across the screen of our mind. Or perhaps not, but we have made ourselves open and available to Spirit. So later today, perhaps in a movie we're watching, a book we're reading, a phone call from a friend, an email we receive, a blog we get on our smartphone, will be that guidance that we're looking for from Spirit as we move forward. And as we're in this prayerful, meditative state, I invite you to speak the name of anyone in your life that needs the healing hand of Spirit, keeping yourself muted. And I'd also invite you to offer a prayer for those that were struck by the 9/11 tragedy, the Afghanistan war, people who are touched by the forest fires here in our own Northern California area, and those touched by this pandemic, and those healthcare workers and firefighters who are out there tirelessly on the front lines of both of these 2 disasters, reaching out and helping others. So now let's open our eyes and be fully present.